Okay, I want to read to you about the life of St. Francis Xavier Cabrini. She was a virgin. She never married. A foundress of the Missionary Sisters of the Sacred Heart. A.D. 1917. Augustine Cabrini owned and farmed the land around Sant'Angelo Lodigiano between Pavia and Lodi, Italy, of course. His wife, Stella Oldini, was a Milanese, and they had 13 children, of whom the youngest was born on July 15, 1850, and christened Maria Francesca. Later, she was to add Saverio to the second name, which is what Xavier becomes in Italian. Frances came particularly under the strict care of her sister Rosa, who had been a school teacher and had not escaped all the dangers of that profession. But the child profited by Rosa's teaching, and family reading aloud from the Annals of the Propagation of the Faith inspired her with an early determination to go to the foreign missions. Her parents, however, had decided on Frances being a school teacher, and when old enough, she was sent to a convent boarding school at Arluno. She duly passed her examinations when she was 18. But then in 1870, she lost both her parents. During the 2 years that followed, she lived on quietly with Rosa, her unassuming goodness making a deep impression on all who knew her. Then she sought admittance to the religious congregation at whose school she had been, and was refused on the grounds of her poor health. She tried another with the same result, but the priest in whose school she was teaching at Vidardo had his eye on her. In 1874, this Don Cerati was appointed provost of the collegiate church at Codogno, and found in his new parish a small orphanage called the House of Providence, whose state left much to be desired. It was managed, or rather mismanaged, by its eccentric foundress, Antonia Tondini, and two other women. The Bishop of Lodi and Monsignor Cerati invited Frances Cabrini to help in this institution and to try to turn its staff into a religious community, and with considerable unwillingness she agreed. Antonia Tondini had consented to her coming, but instead of cooperation gave her only obstruction and abuse. Frances stuck to it, however, obtained several recruits, and with 7 of them in 1877 took her first vows. At the same time, the bishop put her in charge as superioress. This made matters much worse. Sister Tondini's behavior was such that it became an open scandal. Indeed, must have been jealousy. She seems to have become somewhat insane. But for another 3 years, Sister Cabrini and her faithful followers persevered in their efforts till the bishop himself gave up hope. He sent for Sister Cabrini and said to her, "You want to be a missionary sister? Now is the time. I don't know any institute of missionary sisters, so found one yourself." There was an old, disused, and forgotten Franciscan friary at Codogno. Sorry for my butchering some of the names. Into this Mother Cabrini and her 7 faithful followers moved. And as soon as they were fairly settled in, she set herself to draw up a rule for the community. Its work was to be principally the Christian education of girls, and its name, the Missionary Sisters of the Sacred Heart. During the same years, these constitutions were approved by the Bishop of Lodi. They were approved. Within 2 years, the first daughter house was opened at Grumello, and soon there was another at Milan. The general progress of the congregation and the trust of Mother Cabrini were such that in 1887 she went to Rome to ask the Holy See approbation of her little congregation and permission to open a house in Rome. Influential efforts were made to dissuade her from this enterprise. 7 years' trial was far too little, and the first interview with the cardinal vicar of the city, Perocci, confirmed the prudence of her advisers. But only the first. The cardinal was won over. Mother Cabrini was asked to open not 1 but 2 houses in Rome, a free school and a children's home, and the decree of first approval of the Missionary Sisters of the Sacred Heart was issued within a few months. The Bishop of Piacenza, Monsignor Scalabrini, who had established the Society of St. Charles to work among Italian immigrants in America, suggested to Frances Cabrini that she should go out there to help the work of those priests. She would not entertain the idea. The Archbishop of New York, Monsignor Corrigan, sent her a formal invitation. She determined to consult the Pope himself. And Leo XIII said, I like him, not to the east but to the west. When a child, Frances Cabrini once fell into a river, and even afterwards she had a fear of water. She now, with 6 of her sisters, set out on the first of many voyages across the Atlantic. And on March 31st, 1889, they landed in New York. The sisters' reception in New York was hardly encouraging. They had been asked to organize an orphanage for Italian children and to take charge of an elementary school. But on arrival, though warmly welcomed, they found no home ready for them and had to spend the first night at least in lodgings that were filthy and verminous. They had mice and rats. And when Mother Cabrini met Archbishop Corrigan, she learned that, owing to disagreements between himself and the benefactress concerned, the orphanage scheme had fallen through, and the school consisted of pupils but no habitable buildings. The Archbishop wound up by telling her that he could see nothing for it but that the sisters should go back to Italy. To which St. Francis replied with characteristic firmness and definiteness, "No, Monsignor, not that. The Pope sent me here, and here I must stay." Within a few weeks, she had made friends with the benefactress, Countess Casnola, reconciled her with Monsignor Corrigan, found a house for the sisters, and made a start with the orphanage on a modest scale. By July 1889, she was able to revisit Italy, taking with her the first 2 Italo-American recruits to her congregation. 9 months later, she returned to America with reinforcements to take over West Park on the Hudson River from the Society of Jesus. The growing orphanage was transferred to this house, which also became the mother house and novitiate of the congregation in the United States. Its work was prospering, both among immigrants in North America and among the people at home in Italy, and soon Mother Cabrini had to make a trying journey to Managua in Nicaragua, where in difficult and sometimes dangerous circumstances she took over an orphanage and opened a boarding school. On her way back, she visited New Orleans at the request of its Archbishop, the Reverend Francis Janssens. The upshot was that she was able to make a foundation in New Orleans. She got around, Mother Cabrini. That Frances Cabrini was an extraordinarily able woman needs no demonstration. Her work speaks for her. She was slow in learning English and never lost her accent. But this apparently was no handicap. In only one direction did her tact fail, and that was in relation to non-Catholic Christians. She met such in America for the first time in her life, and it took her a long time to recognize their good faith and to appreciate their good lives. It is obvious that Mother Cabrini was a born ruler, and she was as strict as she was just. Sometimes she seems to have been too strict and not to have seen where her inflexibility was leading. It is not clear, for instance, how she thought she was upholding sexual morality when she refused to take illegitimate children in her fee-paying schools. It would appear to be a gesture that penalized only the innocent. But love ruled all, and her strictness was no deterrent to the affection she gave and received. The year 1892, 4th centenary of the discovery of the New World, was also marked by the birth of one of the best known of St. Francis's undertakings, the Columbus Hospital in New York. Then, after a visit to Italy, where she saw the start of a summer house near Rome, and a student's hostel at Genoa, she had to go to Costa Rica, Panama, Chile, across the Andes into Brazil, and so to Buenos Aires. In Buenos Aires, she opened a high school for girls. After another voyage to Italy, where she had to cope with a long lawsuit in the ecclesiastical courts and face riots in Milan, she went to France and made there her first European foundations outside Italy. And the autumn of 1898 saw her in England. Monsignor, later Cardinal, born, then Bishop of Southwark, had already met St. Francis at Codogno, and asked her to open a convent in his diocese, but no foundation was made at this time. And so it went on for another dozen years. Her love for all the children of God took her back and forth over the Western Hemisphere, from Rio to Rome, from Sedham to Seattle. By the time the constitutions of the Missionary Sisters of the Sacred Heart were finally approved in 1907, the 8 members of 1880 had increased to over 1,000 in 8 countries. St. Francis had made more than 50 foundations, responsible for free schools, high schools, and hospitals, and other establishments. No longer working in America for Italian immigrants alone, did not the prisoners in Sing Sing send her an illuminated address at the congregation's Jubilee? So it's saying that these prisoners sent her something, because she must have done work with them as well as the immigrants. Of the later foundations, only 2 can be named here: the Great Columbus Hospital at Chicago, and in 1902, the school at Brockley, now at Honor Oak. From 1911, Mother Cabrini's health was failing. She was then 61 and physically worn out. Of course, the woman was running around the world, and back then travel was not easy. She was on boats constantly. There were no planes. But it was not till 6 years later that she was seen to be failing alarmingly. And then the end came with extreme suddenness. No one was present when St. Francis Xavier Cabrini died in the convent at Chicago on December 22nd, 1917. She was canonized in 1946, the first citizen of that country to be canonized. So she's the first, I believe, American saint. And then we have St. John Neumann. I want to do something on him. I love John Neumann. But St. Mother Cabrini, let me just say something about her. She worked among the Italian immigrants, and my family has a particular love for her. This picture I'm showing you, I've seen that picture since I was a child. My mother always had it hanging up. My grandmother, who was an Italian immigrant. So they adored her, and I like her too. I'm blessed to have her relics. I have a piece of her bone. I have 2 pieces of her bone, and I have her hair. And that was those reliquaries were made in the 30s, because she was not canonized till 1946. So these were before she was canonized, and they're very precious. They're hard to come by now. I've also been to the school that she founded in Washington Heights, New York, where you can see her body. Not her whole body. Her head, I believe, is in another state. It could be in Chicago. I'm not sure, so don't quote me. But most of her body is in New York City, in Washington Heights. And a lot of people go there to venerate her relics. I sat on a bench that she used to sit on outside, which I don't know why they leave it outside, but that's what it says on it. So she used to sit out there and think and pray. So it was nice to do that. But anyway, her feast day is coming up, and that's why I did this video. But of course, it's November, of course, and her feast day is November 13th. So I forgot the day. There's so many feast days. So her feast day is very soon. So that's why I am posting this for you to enjoy and learn about her. Okay, so maybe you can read about her. There's a movie about her, actually, that was made recently, I believe. And there's books on her if you want to get more into her life. But she really was quite a woman, traveling all over. She worked hard for the poor, and she worked hard to better other people's lives. She was a woman of infinite charity. Yes, she had strictness in certain regards, but nobody's perfect. Nobody's perfect, not even a saint. Okay, that's why they become saints. They work through their imperfections, as we should. Anyway, there she is. I love her, and take care. Thank you.